I'm Brittany, this is Jow, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we are finishing Volume 1 of Guardian. We were on... we were on page 341 for chapter 26, where Jow had, kind of there's a fireball headed towards the Mountain River All, and that's kind of where we left off last time. So today we actually get to finish. We read for a couple of hours. We take a break about somewhere in the midpoint to, stand up, walk around, go to the bathroom, grab a snack, anything that you need to do. We usually get through about 40 to 50 pages, and there are 40 pages left in this volume, which means we might just have to take a peek into Volume 2 while we're here. I don't know, that might be a thing that happens. I saw somebody in the chat, I believe it was Josie, mention that she had been watching the previous streams for Modazuche, and that's a real one right there. You get bonus points, Josie, because that was the first reading stream I ever did, and for the first few streams, I wasn't even reading out loud. Modazuche was the big learning experience for what the heck it means to read and react live in front of people. So you get bonus points for seeing that one. That one was not refined in the slightest, but has its own charm, at least, God, I hope it does. So, we are once again on page 341 for chapter 26, with fireballs raining down from the sky. Hearing the commotion behind him, the soul-executing emissary gave a fierce flick of his wrist, sending his blade toward the ghost-faced figure. When he took the opportunity to glance back, the light of the monstrous fireball all but blinded him, leaving him unable to locate Zhao Yunlan. In desperation, he yelled, "Yunlan!" Rather than take advantage of the emissary's distraction, the ghost-faced figure didn't try to evade the attack. On the contrary, he offered his face to the soul-executing blade. The blade cut into his mask, but then the emissary seemed to hesitate. His attention snapped back, and he quickly withdrew, leaving the mask scored but intact. For some reason, he was reluctant to cut off his adversary's mask, and the two brushed past each other. With an uproarious laugh, the ghost-faced figure headed straight for Zhao Yunlan like a huge cloud of black mist. Gathering his long cape, he drew the little cigarette lit with the true flames of samadhi, God, I hope I remembered how that was pronounced, into it. He stood facing Zhao Yunlan, his back to the Mountain River All. The remaining Yochu immediately retreated behind him, forming a ring around the All. Zhao Yunlan regarded him with his eyes narrowed. Bifeng, that pheasant, swore up and down that the true flames of samadhi were enough to make the Monkey King cry for his parents, but your stupid robe isn't even singed. I'm impressed. No expression showed on the ghost-faced mask. I have no wish to hurt you. It would be best if the Guardian stayed out of this. There was no change in Zhao Yunlan's relaxed, easy posture with one hand tucked into a pocket. He didn't need to try hard for his streetwise attitude to shine through. I'm so scared. The soul-executing emissary strode over and pushed Zhao Yunlan behind him, holding his blade at the ready. The way he'd positioned himself was so obviously protective that Zhao Yunlan shot him a confused look. Since the moment the peculiar ghost-faced person had appeared, there had been too many inconsistencies with the emissary's behavior. This was no time to puzzle over that, though. Zhao Yunlan rummaged through his pocket. Judging by your reaction, I guess the legendary Mountain River All really does fear fire. Or, no, the All is all about suppression. It collects souls and keeps them locked inside. My guess is that it fears everything that flows, including water, fire, and maybe even wind. It's just that wind, water, and fire from the mortal realm are all too weak, right? The frighteningly large eyes on the ghostly mask turned, staring straight at Zhao Yunlan. Take care, Guardian. All that cleverness will get you hurt. Ominously, the emissary said, if you dare touch even a strand of his hair, I will make you regret ever crawling out of that place. The ghost-faced figure laughed loudly. "And how do you plan to do that?" "Try me and find out," the emissary replied. "Yeah, fuck around, find out. You know?" The mask's features flickered. Its wearer suddenly launched up into the air, taking flight like a giant bat. Wide wings opened and he dove down, once again meeting the emissary's blade. While those two fought, Zhao Yunlan suddenly dashed away from them. Yo Chu burst up out of the ground and rushed him, and he shot them down one by one. The ghost-faced figure gave chase, eyes flashing. Despite the slash to his back, he continued to pursue Zhao Yunlan recklessly. Black blood gushed from the resulting wound, but it didn't seem to matter. More Yochu were arriving by the moment. Zhao Yunlan swept a leg out and connected with the Yochu's face, knocking the creature to the ground. He stepped on its shoulder, brandishing the whip that had appeared in his palm. With a flick of his wrist, he cracked the whip, aiming for the ghost-masked face. Why is that difficult? I mean, actually, you can kind of figure why it's difficult, but ghost-masked face. Whew, coming up behind him. For some reason, the emissary was unwilling to let the face beneath the mask be exposed. Zhao Yunlan's sudden attack startled him enough that he instinctively raised his blade's sheath as if to block the whip. He managed to stop himself, if only barely. The ghost-faced figure had no apparent fear of guns, but the whip was another matter. He sprang back 7 or 8 meters, retreating out of its range. When Zhao Yunlan convulsed with sudden silent laughter, the ghost-faced man instantly realized something was wrong. He twisted his head back, but too late. With an ear-splitting noise, a bolt of lightning fell from the dark, heavy sky, carrying destruction from the 9 heavens. The Yochu under the mountain river were all consumed by its fury. With a great boom, divine fire illuminated the entire all. Zhao Yunlan let his hands fall open, revealing a lightning invocation talisman that was already disintegrating into fine powder. Heavenly smiting was the punishment that awaited all traitors, evildoers, defilers, and sinners. Since Yochu were unclean by nature, they were twice as efficient as attracting lightning. Zhao Yunlan dusted the powder off his hands. Don't try to act cool. Acting cool gets you struck by lightning. Why do I love the disasters? His words still hung in the air when the mountain river all started to melt like a glacier. It slowly became thinner and smaller. The huge fire resulting from the divine lightning blazed straight toward the sky, reaching several 100 meters up. It echoed with the muffled sound of thunder, forming a maelstrom of flame at the all's base. Anyone who even approached would be seared. Countless lost. Blurry faces flickered within the flames and vanished as if the divine fire had sent them elsewhere. A shaking like a heartbeat arose from the depths of the earth, like Zhao Yunlan had genuinely startled the souls of the mountain and water. Suddenly, the ghost-faced figure appeared right in front of Zhao Yunlan, axe already falling toward him. Fortunately, the emissary wasn't paying any attention to the ruined, hallowed artifact. The soul-executing blade swept sideways with tremendous force. A clang split the air as it met the edge of the axe. But Zhao Yunlan hadn't been the target at all. When the emissary stopped him, the ghost-faced man rolled with it and stayed close. With a creepy smile, he spoke into the emissary's ear. He fucked up my plans. Are you happy? I'm sure he's guessed far more than he lets on. He just won't say it in front of you. I'm having to physically swallow a comment. For spoilery reasons. A tiny motion of the emissary's wrist set his blade vibrating wildly. It sheared cleanly through one of his adversary's arms, but for all the ghost-faced man's response, it might have only... But for all the ghost-faced man's response, it might have only cut a sleeve. If you know, you know. One-armed now, the ghost-faced figure backed up several dozen meters faster than the eye could see. The Yochu that had managed to survive followed him, crawling and rolling along the ground. The blood-stained hem of his robe fluttered in the air. He whistled sharply, then called, "Good luck!" They vanished as they had arrived, without a trace. The emissary looked at Zhao Yunlan's profile, at how the firelight shone on his face, and felt a wave of panic. What was "he's guessed far more than he lets on" supposed to mean? What exactly had Zhao Yunlan guessed? I mean, as a disaster buy? Maybe not much. Even for like an astute one who solves crimes? Who can say? That just makes it a toss-up rather than a sure thing that he didn't notice. And I say this as a disaster buy. Just then, Zhao Yunlan turned to him. "My lord, can I trouble you to block the light with your sleeves again?" "The cut one?" The familiar gray mist rose back up immediately. Zhao Yunlan looked down and let Wang Zheng out of his watch, then pulled out a wrinkled soul-tracking talisman. "Call out to Sangzan. Let me see if I can summon his soul." Wang Zheng's eyes went wide. "Hurry, before the fire goes out." Wang Zheng floated up into the air, facing the mountain river all, and yelled something Zhao Yunlan didn't understand. The talisman he held shattered at once, turning into a tiny breeze that gently caught Wang Zheng's words and swept them into the burning all. Wang Zheng couldn't venture past the mist, but she held herself as close to its border as possible, watching anxiously. As the mountain river all dwindled, so did the fire, and with it the light in Wang Zheng's eyes. But then, as the divine fire was about to burn down to nothing, the blurry shadow of a man appeared in the flames. He seemed to be watching them from the distance. Wang Zheng covered her mouth. Zhao Yunlan took out a soul-guarding order and snapped his fingers. It levitated to float in the air, standing upright. He turned to Wang Zheng. "You go talk to him. If he's willing, tell him to walk toward the soul-guarding order himself." His instructions proved unnecessary. The moment Sangzan saw Wang Zheng, he froze. Then he raced wildly out of the divine fire and straight toward the soul-guarding order, all without a sound. The two spirits flashed in unison and vanished into the soul-guarding order, which then disappeared into Zhao Yunlan's watch. It was a long time before the huge blaze finally died down entirely, leaving behind nothing but the worn-down sacrificial altar. The mountain river all had disappeared without a trace. Zhao Yunlan slowly made his way to the spot. After some digging around, he found a small octagonal stone. It was wedge-shaped, wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. Plucking it from the ground, he threw it to the soul-executing emissary. "Here, your hallowed artifact." He's just always hot about it. The emissary snatched the unimpressive-looking stone from the air. First, he carefully looked it over, and then he put it to his ear and listened. Thin, howling cries came from within, faint and full of desolation. Wang Zheng spoke up from the watch, her voice full of hope. Have they all been freed?" "No," the emissary said. "They are still inside. The essence of mountains and rivers has no fear of fire. The Guardian said it fears everything that flows, but that fear belongs to the souls and power it had drawn in from the mortal realm and built up around itself. This is what was burned away. This is its true form." Zhao Yunlan laughed. "Yeah, I just said that to fool him. Did he really think I was going to split the mountain river all? I've noticed that people who go around wearing masks don't tend to be very smart." You know, I can't help it that I find little shits just irresistible, okay? If you're not at least a little bit of a smartass, I mean, I seem to oscillate between the smartass and the stoic ones, because I love me a charismatic smartass, but I also love the Byronic hero stoic, what is he thinking whole deal. But see, even then, I'm going to tell on myself, but even then, the stoic ones usually come with their own specific brand of smartassery. I have a type, I don't know what to tell you. That doesn't include you, my lord, Zhao Yunlan added, making it worse. Of course not. The soul-executing emissary was perfectly aware that Zhao Yunlun was unhappy about his many secrets. The fearless piece of shit was blatantly insulting him while claiming not to. He wasn't sure whether he wanted to laugh or cry, but one thing was clear. Everybody take a drink. But one thing was clear, Zhao Yunlun had almost certainly overheard the last thing his ghost-faced adversary had said, and he was now making some extremely calculated jabs as a result. On the one hand, it gave him the sense that their relationship was becoming more casual and familiar. On the other, Zhao Yunlun was subtly conveying that he wouldn't make wild guesses just because of a few overheard words. The emissary's heart sank. The man really was incredibly astute. It was likely that he wouldn't be able to hide the truth from him for much longer. Wang Zheng made a surprised noise. Anxiously, she asked, "Then how do we let him out? How can we help them find peace?" "Since my lord has removed the mountain river all, the yin-gathering spell on the mountaintop is now also broken. Once the trapped souls think it through, they'll come out on their own. They're only still stuck in there because they don't want to come out yet. What can keep them in there now other than themselves?" Zhao Yunlun paused, then said pointedly, "When it comes down to it, wasn't everything that happened all those years ago because people felt wronged?" Wang Zheng suddenly went quiet. Noticing that clarity was running again, Zhao Yunlun took out his phone, checked the time, and reset the time on the watch. "Isn't that true of you too, silly girl?" "I was wrong," she mumbled. "You sure were," Zhao Yunlun said easily. "Once you get back, write me a 30,000-word report and don't think you'll be getting any bonuses for the next 6 months. Reflect carefully, Comrade Wang Zheng. You'll be representing our department at the party seminar at the end of this year. I'll get Zhu Hong to find you a corpse to wear, so study hard." Wang Zheng was silent for a while. Finally, she said softly, "So right from the start, I was powerless to do anything about all this." "Just realizing that now, you dumbass?" Zhao Yunlun suddenly laughed and pulled the ripped-out page about the Lobula curse from his ratty wallet. He dug a hole and buried it deep under the snow. "There are always things that you can't control. Either you become strong enough to solve every problem, or you just forget it. It's not good to obsess over them. That just eats up your mental RAM." This time, Wang Zheng was silent for even longer. The soul-executing emissary approached and extended a hand to him. "We should leave. I will take the Guardian to the mountain pass, where the land is level." Zhao Yunlun was utterly exhausted. If someone was willing to give him a ride, of course he wasn't going to walk. Nonchalantly, he let the emissary take his hand. The emissary yanked him in close. Everything went dark. Before Zhao Yunlun could catch his balance and open his eyes, they had already teleported. The emissary's cape opened, revealing that they were at the mountain pass. Releasing Zhao Yunlun, the emissary backed up a step, bowed respectfully, and turned away. Between one heartbeat and the next, he vanished into a huge black hole. As the emissary disappeared, Zhao Yunlun rubbed his chin, deep in thought. Wang Zheng, still within his watch, suddenly spoke up. "I haven't thanked you yet," she began. Zhao Yunlun cursed and rapped on the watch. "Don't think sweet talk will get you out of those 30,000 words. I expect that report in my inbox next week. And when we stay up to greet the new year, all of you who had to write reports this year will have to read them out loud as part of our long-standing tradition. Don't think you can get out of that either." It's the end of the chapter. We are on page 351 for chapter 27. It was evening by the time Zhao Yunlun strolled back to the little hut on the mountain. Zhu Hong shot him a questioning look. Zhao Yunlun replied by flashing his watch at her. She understood at once and took a little handmade yarn doll from her bag. Passing casually behind Zhao Yunlun, she rubbed the doll over his watch. Where no one could see, 2 wisps of white smoke flitted into the tiny doll. It suddenly came to life, moving slightly in her palm. Zhao Yunlun assessed the room. Everyone was accounted for and seemed to be in good shape. Chu Shujia stood guard by the door, not moving a muscle. Da Qing was lying by his feet. Go Changcheng was taking care of whatever was boiling in the little pot. The students were sitting in a circle, clearly on edge as they listened to Lin Jing, that fake monk, tell a ghost story. And Shen Wei was... Where was Shen Wei? Wait, how could he have thought everyone was accounted for? Zhao Yunlun's expression darkened. Shen She? He asked Juhong. She froze, a strangely lost look crossing her face. Then someone spoke up mildly from behind Zhao Yunlan. Are you looking for me? He turned to see Shen Wei walking in, arms full of firewood. Juhong slapped her forehead as if just remembering. Right, yes. Since we'll be here another night, Shen She was worried we wouldn't have enough fuel. He went out to find dry kindling. Shen Wei set the wood down by the fire to dry. It's best to be prepared. Did you find Miss Wang? Zhao Yunlan glanced at him, confused. Uh-huh, I found her. We happened to run into the rescue squad on our way here. I have some things I need her to take care of, so they took her back for me. Oh, Shen Wei gave him a gentle smile. As long as she's all right. You've been running around outside all day. Come drink some woo-hoo-hoo. Ben Longen? Again, emphasis syllable. I'm not entirely sure where to put them. It comes with a footnote, though. Hang on. Acetus indigotica? A traditional Chinese herbal medicine commonly used for colds. With a really cool name. Come drink some. I'm going to try this again. I really can't. I really can't. So you don't catch a cold. Zhao Yunlan stared at him for a while, then accepted the medicine as if nothing were out of the ordinary. He drank it down in one gulp. In the end, he didn't say anything. Over the past few days, Zhao Yunlan had gotten drunk with Longue, then driven through the snow for an entire day and not slept at all during the second half of the night. Then he'd been drugged by Wang Zheng and injured by the mountain river all, on top of trekking around in the snow all day at high altitude. He'd even ended up fighting a bunch of monsters. The result of all those intense activities caught up with him the next morning when he got up and found he had a crick in his neck. Crick neck or no crick neck, he was still the boss. The moment he woke up, he started issuing orders. Bright and early in the morning, the small hut on the mountain was in chaos under his direction. Zhao Yunlan ordered Lin Jing to massage his shoulder, at which point Lin Jing showed off the Shaolin sect strongman's fingers and nearly broke his boss's neck. The pain practically made Zhao Yunlan cry, and definitely made him suspect Lin Jing of doing it deliberately to get back at him. Rather than doing anything actually helpful, the pair of them chased each other around the hut for 20 minutes, only stopping when Juhong ran out of patience and yelled at them. Zhao Yunlan gave Lin Jing a few fierce punches, then realized that he could miraculously move his neck again. Clasping his hands behind his back, he strode inside to gather his things. As he passed by, he even grabbed Da Qing and wrapped the cat around his neck like a scarf. The class leader was thoroughly confused. When did this cat get here? Is it going back with us? I thought it was a feral cat. Snarkily, Zhao Yunlan replied, Have you ever seen a feral cat this plump? Da Qing gave him a decisive smack. She walked over, full of sympathy, and petted Da Qing's sleek, glossy fur. Poor guy, being shipped all this way by air. Oh, right, Jajaga. Ooh. Our teacher said he'll drive on the way back so you can get some rest. Zhao Yunlan pressed a hand to his cheek where the cat had smacked him and stopped in his tracks to look at Shen Wei, who happened to be looking back at him. When their eyes met, Shen Wei looked down with a soft smile. His expressions and language were always so reserved. To Zhao Yunlan, it seemed like every single look on Shen Wei's face concealed thousands of words. These few thousand words seem incredibly, easy to guess. His heart skipped a beat as he thought about the look in Shen Wei's eyes the night before, when he'd awakened to find the professor watching him. It made him feel as if someone had pinched the tip of his heart, leaving it feeling tender in more ways than one. Zhao Yunlan spent the drive down the mountain asleep in the passenger seat. When his cell phone suddenly rang and woke him, it was already noon and the sun had started to move westward. The car had long since left the snowy regions, and from time to time they passed people's homes on the roadside. It was Longue calling. As soon as he heard that they were on their way back, he arranged a place for them to stay. Once again, he was overflowing with enthusiasm. He even expressed that they hadn't enjoyed themselves enough the last time. This time, he said, they just have to drink until they dropped. Zhao Yunlan's expression was ugly when he hung up. He was neither an alcoholic nor a Superman. What he wanted most right now was to sleep in a bed until the world ended, instead of having to grit his teeth and call a chubby man bro while they poured booze down each other's throats and spouted bullshit. The sudden terrible news completely tanked his mood. Even teasing Shen Wei lost its appeal. Putting his phone away, he settled in to shut his eyes for as long as possible and try for a good nap before the tough battle awaiting him that night. Shen Wei waited until Zhao Yunlan's breathing was slow and even before adjusting the blanket covering him. It really just... They came out of nowhere and clocked me with that one. By the time Long Ge welcomed them on the main street downtown, Zhao Yunlan seemed to have shaken off his listlessness. He was once again a lively man, full of vim and vigor. Together, he and Long Ge were poster boys for the saying, 1,000 shots are not enough for chatty lips, and holes through stomachs are not enough for alcoholics. But the truth was, Zhao Yunlan wasn't feeling well. When they cracked open the 6th bottle of liquor, he was already turning pale, despite looking unconcerned and pressing ahead through sheer willpower. Long Ge's tongue was twice its usual size, and his face was red as he directed the waiter to, fill it up. Unable to stop him, all Zhao Yunlan could do was go along with it as he nodded at the waiter. He smiled bitterly and went to pick up his cup. Out of nowhere, Shen Wei, who had been observing in silence, suddenly grabbed his hand. Long Ge and Zhao Yunlan were both taken by surprise. Shen Wei raised Zhao Yunlan's glass and stood up. Very courteously, he said. Director Zhao caught a bit of a cold in the mountains. He isn't feeling very well right now. Zhao Yunlan hadn't expected salvation to appear from that quarter. He quickly played along, lowering his head and coughing a few times. With a smile, Shen Wei continued, Mr. Long has taken such incredible care of us all this time, but unfortunately these are all poor students who haven't earned a cent in academia. We truly have no way to repay you. This drink is out of gratitude. He clinked his glass with Long Ge's and emptied it in one swallow. Long Ge paused. Hiya, he exclaimed, a little surprised. It was one thing to call a thug like Zhao Yunlan bro. Arrogant scholarly types were quite another matter. He fully expected them to look down on him, so he tried not to bother them if he could. He'd certainly never imagined that Shen Wei would pay him such respect. It was a new milestone in Long Ge's social drinking career. Without a word, he dizzily took aim at Shen Wei, too. Zhao Yunlan quickly took a look around the table. The fake monk, who had excused himself by saying, monks don't drink alcohol, was currently reciting a Buddhist scripture as he gnawed on a huge bone. Zhu Hong was pretending to be an elegant lady who abstained from alcohol and was contentedly eating by herself, not even looking up. Chu Shujie had only touched his glass to his lips before pretending to be dead to the world. And Guo Changcheng, that honest kid, knew to fight for his boss, so he drunk himself unconscious ages ago. He was probably genuinely dead to the world. Not the best boy. All in all, not a single one of these traders present could step up and help him. Zhao Yunlan ground his teeth together and made a mental note about all of them. Then he drew on his charm and his capacity for drinking. Working together, he and Shen Wei drank Long Ge, whose enthusiasm had caused such chaos, under the table. They were free at last. Shen Wei clearly wasn't used to this kind of gathering. His cheeks had been red for quite some time, and his gaze was a little hazy. When he tried to stand up, he couldn't find his balance and plopped back into his seat. Zhao Yunlan hurried to help him. Leaning close, he asked, "Are you all right?" Shen Wei swayed. He didn't reply, but he did take the opportunity to wrap his arms tight around Zhao Yunlan's waist. I mean, climb on top of each other? Get it over with already. Jesus. Zhao Yunlan's heart fluttered. No, Shen Wei clearly wasn't quite all right. Zhao Yunlan licked his lips lightly and lowered his voice. With thoroughly indecent ideas running through his mind, he said, I'll, help you back to your room. He took Shen Wei's lack of response for tacit agreement. Ducking under Shen Wei's arm to support him, Zhao Yunlan half guided and half pulled him upright. The good news was that Shen Wei wasn't a rude drunk. Even thoroughly intoxicated, he was quiet and biddable rather than behaving wildly. Zhao Yunlan forced himself awake and briefly said his goodbyes. Then, still supporting Shen Wei, he swiped open the room beside his own. He eased Shen Wei down on the edge of the bed and had him sit upright. Looking at Shen Luoxia's dazed, blank face, he couldn't resist tussling his hair. If you're this terrible at holding your liquor, why did you drink for me? Shen Wei only looked up, tracking his movements with unblinking eyes. Stay put. I'll find you a towel to wipe your face. Zhao Yunlan went into the bathroom and grabbed the towels provided by the hotel. He dampened one with cold water and another with hot water. As he turned around to take them to the drunkard, he had a bit of a shock. Shen Wei had gotten up and appeared behind him without making a sound, and was now leaning against the door, staring straight at him in absolute silence. Are we about to have like a Wang Ji moment? The intensity of Shen Wei's gaze was so heavy it was almost palpable. Zhao Yunlan extended a towel toward him. Here. Shen Wei's reactions were slightly delayed. It took a moment before he slowly raised a hand, and then, instead of taking the towel, he reached right past it and took hold of Zhao Yunlan's wrist instead. Zhao Yunlan found himself being dragged into Shen Wei's arms by brute force. He had noticed earlier that something wasn't quite right with Shen Wei, and the mood was a bit off. But Zhao Yunlan was still delighted by this development. He offered no resistance when Shen Wei yanked him close, or when Shen Wei pushed him up against the wall roughly, and found his mouth nearly tearing at his lips. Hang on. Even the sudden tang of blood only heightened Zhao Yunlan's excitement. He lazily slipped his... Hang on, we gotta do this right. Just hang on. Calm down. He lazily slipped his arms around Shen Wei, his nimble fingers following and then reaching under the hem of Shen Wei's shirt. He teasingly stroked Shen Wei's back, noticing that the skin he was caressing was unusually cool, like soft jade, except this particular soft jade was violently tearing at Zhao Yunlan's clothes. Oh, fuck me, there's art. Okay. There hasn't really been art like this in a danmei translation until now, so fully caught off guard. We'll get there. Zhao Yunlan tilted his head back indulgently. Shen Wei could tear whatever he wanted. Meanwhile, Zhao Yunlan's hand was traveling lower. He slid it down the back of Shen Wei's pants and started to explore underneath. But before he managed to start touching in earnest, he found himself picked up by the waist. He was totally unprepared for his feet to leave the floor entirely, or to be spun around in midair, or to fall backward as Shen Wei slammed him into the bed. The bed creaked in protest at this treatment. Fortunately, the hotel's pillows and bedding were thick enough that the impact didn't hurt, but Zhao Yunlan yelped, half in earnest. He dabbed at the blood on his lips and gave a faint laugh. "Babe, you're a little wild." Shen Wei stared down at him. There was a sense of command in that look and an emotion in his night-black eyes that seemed barely contained. A hint of red highlighted his face. In the dim light, he was more beautiful than ever, rendering Zhao Yunlan suddenly breathless. He reached up and took off Shen Wei's glasses, then sat partway up and drew Shen Wei into his arms. Tugging Shen Wei's collar open, he slid his hands downward, undoing buttons as he went. His fingers left trails of fire in their wake, revealing a body that was pale but not at all delicate. Zhao Yunlan's eyes darkened. He lowered his head and gave Shen Wei's chest leisurely kisses. Voice a bit muffled, he said, "I was planning to keep my hands to myself, but then you went and threw yourself at me." He'd barely gotten the words out when Shen Wei abruptly grabbed his shoulder and pushed him back down on the mattress. The grip on Zhao Yunlan's wrist tightened painfully as his hand was pressed into the pillow, and then Shen Wei's teeth closed on his throat. You know, y'all just deal with this art for a second. I gotta go offline. I'll be back in a hang. You just look at this. Just ignore me for a second. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Internally screaming for so many reasons. Whew. Lying under his weight, Zhao Yunlan felt Shen Wei's breathing grow harsher and harsher, as if he wanted to swallow Zhao Yunlan whole. Shen Wei's sheer eagerness had caught him off guard, and the biting wasn't entirely comfortable. Zhao Yunlan struggled a little, unable to keep a small laugh from escaping. "Come on, babe, there's no rush. His slight movement seemed to unleash something. Shen Wei's manhandling had been a bit rough, but now it took on a certain madness. Shen Wei reached down and grabbed the arm Zhao Yunlan was resisting with, violently twisting it behind his back. A hand closed on Zhao Yunlan's neck, as if Shen Wei wanted to choke him to death. Zhao Yunlan's aging bones creaked as his head was forced up. Before he could even protest... Aging bones? What is he, in his early 30s? Before he could even protest, icy fingers seized his chin. Shen Wei leaned closer and kissed him. Again and again and again. Ravaging and plundering. Suddenly, the lights went out with a pop, plunging the room into darkness. The only sound was a man panting like a wolf that had known only starvation for many, many years. Something abruptly slashed across Zhao Yunlan's shirt, which hadn't had many buttons to begin with. "This is a little too wild, Shen Wei." Zhao Yunlan's heart might have been alight and burning, but this kind of drunken craze wasn't what he had in mind. He deftly rolled to the side, shouldering Shen Wei and pulling his arm free. As soon as Zhao Yunlan protested, Shen Wei froze. Then, without a word, he toppled into Zhao Yunlan's arms and went utterly still. The lights in the room all came back on at once. The sudden glare was blinding. Eyes closed against it, Zhao Yunlan moved his wrenched shoulder and caught hold of Shen Wei. Nearly every trace of his earlier excitement was gone. With a bitter laugh, he said, "When you get drunk and cut loose, you really..." He cut himself off mid-sentence, shocked into sobriety. All the alcohol in his system evaporated from his pores. In the stillness of the room, he couldn't hear Shen Wei's breathing. Zhao Yunlan's hand trembled. He slowly pressed it to Shen Wei's neck and counted off 30 whole seconds. There was no pulse. Shen Wei's face still had a red hue to it, but every sign indicated that he was now a corpse. "Shen Wei? Shen Wei!" Zhao Yunlan turned him over and slapped his face hard. When that elicited no reaction at all, Zhao Yunlan immediately pressed on his chest and did a few rounds of CPR. There was still no reaction. The body lying on the bed could have been a mannequin. Fuck! Zhao Yunlan jumped up and retrieved his phone from where he dropped it. Its battery had fallen out, so he quickly stuffed it back in, turned the phone on, dialed the emergency number, and briefly explained the situation. Then, following the doctor's instructions, he tore through Shen Wei's luggage, hoping to find medications in case Shen Wei had a chronic illness of some kind. While ransacking Shen Wei's things, Zhao Yunlan suddenly took conscious note of his own torn shirt. The tear was a long diagonal slit from his left shoulder down to the right side of his abdomen. The shirt was heavy and made for the cold weather. Despite that, it had been tidily sliced in two, against the grain of the fabric. Zhao Yunlan closed one hand over each side and scrunched the shirt together. It had unmistakably been made by a sharp object. But, drunk or not, Shen Wei's hands were empty. He didn't even have a nail clipper on him. Where had the sharp object come from? Zhao Yunlan hadn't been all that drunk to begin with, and just now he'd been in a complete panic, but his brain was finally coming back online. No one's breathing and pulse would stop simultaneously without any warning signs. Even a sudden heart attack would have some other indicators, and yet Shen Wei had simply shut off, just like the room's lights, as if he also had a switch. All told, this didn't seem much like an illness. It was more like his soul had simply left his body. Shocked and confused, Zhao Yunlan looked back at the man on the bed. After a moment of hesitation, he pulled a black leather notebook from his laptop bag. He took a yellow paper talisman from between the book's pages, then took a strand of Shen Wei's hair, rolled it up in the talisman, and lit the talisman on top of the notebook. Thin ashes fell into the book and swirled into nothingness like salt falling into water. A line of text appeared on the yellowing paper. Great evil. A soulless being. Zhao Yunlan's expression shifted. Pressing between the pages, he quietly asked, "Where is he from?" The words on the paper flashed, then disappeared. This time, it took longer for text to appear. An unspeakable place, thousands of qi below the Huangquan. Zhao Yunlan's pupils constricted. Then he got up and tidied the room silently. Somehow he found a handful of safety pins and pinned the tattered remains of his shirt closed from the inside, then shrugged back into the jacket he'd taken off because it stank of alcohol. Very soon after that, the ambulance arrived. That woke everyone up, and after another round of chaos, Shen Wei was finally carried out. The students were all panicked and at a loss for what to do, having lost their pillar of support. Zhao Yunlan overrode them all and made them stay put. He exchanged a glance with Lin Jing and got into the ambulance with Shen Wei. Shen Wei's heart continued not to respond, despite the doctor's frantic attempts to snatch his life from the jaws of death. Zhao Yunlan waited off to the side, tapping his thumb silently against the knuckle of his forefinger. At this point, he knew there probably wasn't anything wrong with Shen Wei at all. The most likely scenario was that whoever was possessing the body had gotten drunk and was temporarily out of it, or the soul had straight up left. That would explain the terrifying symptoms. And if that was the case, Zhao Yunlan smoothed a crumpled invocation talisman behind his back. It lit in his palm. Then he lit a second, and then a third, but Shen Wei still didn't react. Time crawled by. The doctors were on the verge of giving up. Zhao Yunlan concentrated and lit a fourth talisman, chanting in his mind, "Wandering soul, heed my call." With the third repetition, the talisman, which had nearly burnt out, flared with a whoosh. Shen Wei's corpse-like body suddenly jolted fiercely from the electric shock. "There's a pulse!" Someone yelled. "We've got a pulse!" Zhao Yunlan exhaled slowly, then calmly cupped all the ashes in his palm and hid them in his pocket. Shen Wei had reached the hospital by ambulance in the middle of the night. A number of tests were conducted on him with no apparent results. Zhao Yunlan had called the ambulance because all the booze had shut his brain off, and this huge ruckus had ensued. All he could do now was stay with Shen Wei, shivering in the depths of winter. Even Long Ge was taken by surprise. He'd certainly never imagined that he could drink someone into the hospital. Badly frightened, he raced to the hospital, but Zhao Yunlan managed to convince him to go back home. Fear had turned Long Ge's face the color of a cucumber. The next day, Shen Wei woke up to find tubes of all sorts attached to him. With no idea when or where he was, he froze, then sat up and started removing the array of things that were connected to him. "I'm afraid you'll have to stay for a few days of observation," said a voice, and Shen Wei finally registered Zhao Yunlan sitting in the corner. Zhao Yunlan was bundled up in a large army coat and held a steaming cup in his hands. The steam hid his face just enough that Shen Wei couldn't see his expression clearly. "I'm at the hospital?" Shen Wei was perfectly still, and then his expression changed as he seemed to realize something. Did I drink too much?" "That's an understatement," said Zhao Yunlan. "You drank so much that your breathing and pulse both stopped." Shen Wei's heart sank. He didn't think that his alcohol tolerance was so low. As he fumbled desperately for an excuse, Zhao Yunlan set his cup aside lightly and said, "But really, this is my fault. I was dazed from the alcohol too, and you scared me, so I didn't realize what was going on. I just panicked and called the emergency number. You might have to cooperate with the hospital for a few days." He paused before finishing his sentence. Shen Wei had a sinking suspicion. "My Lord Emissary," is how Zhao Yunlan finished his sentence. That would be the end of the chapter. We are on page 367 for chapter 28. Let me, hang on, let me check pages real quick. Oh, actually. 79. Oh, cool. Okay. Wait. Page math. Hold, please. Because I believe this might be the last chapter it's the last chapter of the volume. So 367 to 79. Right. My brain just did not want to. All right. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. This is the last chapter of the volume. We're going to read it, and then we're going to take our short break, and then we're going to come back, and we are going to start volume 2. We're going to dive right into it. I'm deeply excited. We'll talk in a second, because I don't know exactly how they're gonna... We'll talk in a second. For a while, Shen Wei didn't make a single sound. Zhao Yunlan didn't rush him. He just sat motionless in the corner, waiting. The room was so quiet that the sound of clarity ticking was faintly audible. Eventually, Shen Wei sighed. With a wave, he banished the hospital gown and replaced it with his vast black robe. The soul-executing blade was suddenly there, in his hand. He secured the unremarkable-seeming blade at his waist, but for the first time he didn't conceal his face. "How did you know?" Zhao Yunlan just looked at him, seeming thoughtful. When he finally opened his mouth, what came out was, "I didn't. I was bluffing." The expression that spread across Shen Wei's face defied description. Zhao Yunlan laughed. No, it wasn't a complete guess. There were a few clues, like how your little messenger puppet showed up practically the second I stepped into the Hanged tribe's cave. When I mentioned encountering the Reaper with the lantern up on the mountain, I didn't say what they were doing, but when you replied, you said that they'd been ferrying souls. I couldn't help remembering that the Reaper bowed twice to the car before continuing on their way. I didn't think I was mistaken about that. And, oh, right, when I got back to the hut, I asked Zhuhong where you'd gone, and she went completely blank. It was like she completely forgot your existence until you were there in front of her. And also, there was the way you gazed at me that whole night in the hut. He did not say this out loud. Zhao Yunlan took a moment to swallow those words back down. His tone changed. Also, when you stopped breathing like that and I couldn't find a pulse, I consulted the Book of Life and Death about you. It told me Shen Wei was a soulless being who came from an unspeakable place. Evidently I was careless, Shen Wei said. A heavy silence fell between them. To Zhao Yunlan, it felt excruciatingly awkward, especially when he remembered the horny way he'd followed Shen Wei around. The idea of keeling over and developing amnesia had a certain appeal. He gave a dry cough. Shenlasha, it never occurred to me that you were... That is, if I messed around too much or was too forward, my apologies. Please don't take it too seriously, my lord. Shen Wei shook his head wordlessly. The awkwardness was unbearable. Still wearing the jacket, Zhao Yunlan lay down on the cot provided for patients' families. It was short and narrow, sized for a single person. He had to curl up slightly to fit on it, which was a pitiful look. But even while lying there pathetically, he remembered to say, "It's late, so you should get some rest. If you need anything, just say the word." Shen Wei made a noise of acknowledgement. Zhao Yunlan immediately regretted saying it. It wasn't as if Shen Wei was actually a patient. Feeling that everything that had come out of his mouth all day had been wrong, Zhao Yunlan shut up, rolled onto his side, closed his eyes, and dozed. But, all that aside, if Shen Wei was the sole executing emissary, how had he felt with Zhao Yunlan constantly at his side? What kind of gaze had been behind the black mist that shrouded his past and his future, as well as his face? It was bound to be a sleepless night. Director Zhao of the Special Investigations Department was suddenly on his best behavior. He stopped spending time messing around or running his mouth with chubby Longa. He stopped taking every opportunity to tease Shen Laoshe. When his team asked to go to the night market on the department's dime, Director Zhao waved his hand and allowed it. He didn't curse at anyone or show any intention of joining them. Shen Wei stayed at the hospital for further observation. Zhao Yunlan spent the time curled up in the room's narrow cot, surfing the internet and doing a bunch of weird research on his tablet. Zhao Yunlan had vaguely indicated to Shen Wei that he should cooperate with the hospital. How exactly Shen Wei cooperated was unclear, but one way or another, after 2 days, he was diagnosed with a severe allergy to alcohol that had paralyzed his heart. When Longa, who was taking them to the airport, heard about this, he stomped his feet and pounded his chest with regret. Tugging at Shen Wei's hand, he cried, "Bro, if your Longa knew you couldn't drink, I never would have let you have a single sip!" When Zhao Yunlan contemplated just whose Longa was claiming to be, his eyelid developed a tic. He grabbed Shen Wei's luggage and said, "Time to go through security." Shen Wei quickly turned. "I can take my own bags." Without replying, Zhao Yunlan jumped to the side and continued on with Shen Wei's luggage. The idle brats of the Special Investigation Department, with Lin Jing as ringleader, all started to cough meaningfully. As if afraid there wasn't enough chaos in the world, they began making faces at each other. Zhu Hong elbowed Go Cheng Chung. "Hey, Xiaoguo, do you have a partner?" Go Cheng Chung blushed and shook his head. Zhu Hong stared significantly at Zhao Yunlan's back. "If you want to find a partner in the future, you could learn a lot from our boss. Following his example will definitely make you the most eligible bachelor of the new era. But just remember, if you want a relationship that lasts, you need to make sure you learn from him selectively. He starts off strong, but once things get going, his behavior isn't worth imitating." Still blushing, Go Cheng Chung had the vague sense that Zhu Hongji was cursing their boss in broad daylight. Zhao Yunlan turned and glared at them, which just made Lin Jing and Chu Shujie laugh even harder. On the flight over, Zhao Yunlan had troubled the flight attendant specifically to switch his seat. The whole trip he'd followed Shen Wei like a mosquito, embarrassing himself nonstop in front of him. Now that they were heading back, Zhao Yunlan really wasn't in the mood, except when he got to his seat, he realized that Lin Jing, who had been in charge of the tickets, had helpfully put him and Shen Wei beside each other in seats far away from everyone else. Lin Jing helped him stow his luggage and took the opportunity to whisper in Zhao Yunlan's ear, "No need to thank me, boss." Zhao Yunlan gritted his teeth. "I'll thank your fucking ancestors." But his piggish teammates weren't going to let him off easy. After the 3-hour flight finally ended, Lin Jing realized Shen Wei hadn't brought his car. With great enthusiasm, the fake monk eagerly loaded the students into taxis one by one and sent them off. That done, he beamed like a matchmaker and said to Shen Wei, "Shen Laoshe, don't you live near Director Zhao? Let him drive you home." Zhao Yunlan said nothing, but in his head he named a little doll, Lin Jing, and stabbed it until it was full of needles like a porcupine. The curse seemed to have some effect. Lin Jing turned away and sneezed convulsively. Shen Wei smiled. "No need, I can get a taxi." With others present, what could Zhao Yunlan say? He could only take charge of Shen Wei's luggage again. "Let me drive you," he said. "It's already dark. If I drive you, it'll be..." He meant to say it'll be safer. But before the words escaped, he was revisited by the memory of that day in the alley when he'd beaten up a bunch of thugs for Shen Wei. And worse, had acted so cool about it, exactly like a stupid peacock displaying its feathers when it was already showing its ass. It was a real struggle to keep smiling. Recalling the past was truly unbearable. During the entire drive, Zhao Yunlan had nothing to say. He drove in the direction of his own home and then, unerringly, to Shen Wei's building. He parked below it and said, "We're here." Shen Wei didn't move. "How did you know I lived here? You looked me up?" Zhao Yunlan's laugh was very dry. "I didn't find anything. My lord's identity is seamless." Shen Wei glanced at him. "The Guardian must have many more questions for me, I suppose." Zhao Yunlan didn't reply. Their gazes met in the rearview mirror. When Shen Wei eventually broke eye contact, he said, "Then why don't you ask?" Zhao Yunlan was silent a while longer. Finally, he said, "I doubt my lord is using this identity to exist in the mortal realm for normal official business. Is there some other special reason?" "No," Shen Wei said, a little distracted. "It's for selfish reasons. It's because of someone." By this point, Zhao Yunlan didn't need to ask who someone might be. Shen Wei regretted the words at once. What possible point was there in telling Zhao Yunlan that? What was he hoping to gain by saying it? In that moment, he felt both laughable and despicable. Everyone in the room is just generally embarrassed to be alive right now. He was accustomed to being vague. His reply to Zhao Yunlan was essentially the equivalent of carving his own chest open and exposing his heart. He found he didn't want to know how Zhao Yunlan might respond. Shen Wei hastily ducked his head and opened the car door. "Thank you. I'll go inside now." Zhao Yunlan didn't respond. Still looking at the rearview mirror, he watched the panicked way Shen Wei got out of the car and realized he was mildly annoyed. For nearly half a year he had stopped at absolutely nothing to pursue Shen Wei and had come so close to having him in his grasp. He hadn't let shame or dignity hold him back. The saying, if he wanted the stars, he wouldn't give him the moon, was an apt one. Even if Shen Wei were straight as a steel rod, he would have succumbed by this point. But Zhao Yunlan didn't dare treat the soul-executing emissary the way he had Shen Wei. He and the emissary had known each other for years now. They might not be close, but their relationship was a good one. If someone had even the most basic intellect and self-awareness, they would naturally maintain respect and distance with the soul-executing emissary. The emissary's powers weren't what made him formidable. After all, he'd simply been born with those. No, he was formidable because he was him. The soul-executing emissary had been born in the blackest depths of the netherworld. Places that dark were what birthed monsters. It was already easy to fall when one was at their lowest, and that was all the more inescapable for beings of absolute darkness born with claws and fangs. Since the dawn of time, the soul-executing emissary was the only aberration who had risen from such uncleanness to become a god. Even if one day the soul-executing emissary's, Shen Wei's, body crumbled and fell into filth, he would still be incomparably noble and unsullied. No one would dare desecrate him. And now, as Shen Wei left the car, a terrible bleakness overshadowed his face. Zhao Yunlan's heart turned over. With no real idea what he was thinking, he leaned across and grabbed the door. I've never been inside the soul-executing emissary's territory. Aren't you going to invite me up? Shen Wei paused, then nodded. Gladly. Zhao Yunlan locked the car door and followed Shen Wei upstairs into the apartment, his mood a little uncertain. Please sit, said Shen Wei. The apartment was pristine, but somehow it didn't quite feel like a home. Looking at the immaculate sofa, Zhao Yunlan almost felt bad for sitting on it. He found himself moving in an extraordinarily polite way. Shen Wei opened his water dispenser and took out its accompanying kettle, which he filled with cold water. Rather than heating it up, he brought the kettle over directly. He held it in both hands, and the water quickly started to boil. Then he got out tea and teacups, steeping and pouring tea with the smoothness of long practice. I only stop by here occasionally, and rarely for long when I do. I'm afraid I don't have any new tea. I hope you don't mind. Zhao Yunlan didn't care. It wasn't as if he could tell the difference between new and stale tea anyway. With the teacup radiating heat into his fingers, he suddenly asked, My lord, why did you hide your identity from me all this time? Shen Wei paused. If I'd told you, it would have been awkward. Well, thank God we avoided that fate. You mean you saved yourself from feeling awkward and instead you get to watch me feel awkward, right? Did it make you happy seeing me do all those stupid things? Rather than answering the question, Shen Wei only smiled good-naturedly. But Zhao Yunlan's blunt confrontation had slightly eased the awkwardness in the air. When Shen Wei spoke, it was to say, About that ghost-faced individual we encountered the other day. If you see him again, you must be careful. Zhao Yunlan lowered his head and blew on the leaves on the surface of his tea. He's after the 4 hallowed artifacts? Yes. And what happens when they're all gathered together? They were created before the equilibrium of yin and yang, heaven and earth. It was the beginning of chaos, Shen Wei said. All things had souls, but not spirits. Life, but not death. People were gods, but the gods were as ants. The 4 hallowed artifacts carry the power of chaos. If someone with ill will were to gather them together to use them, it could be the end of the world as we know it. My position entails certain responsibilities. I would rather destroy the netherworld's hallowed artifacts than allow them to fall into the hands of anyone who would misuse them. Zhao Yunlan was silent for some time, which made Shen Wei uneasy. He didn't fear Zhao Yunlan's questions, but he feared the lack of them. Zhao Yunlan knew how to act appropriately and also when to stop. He might never say or ask anything he shouldn't, but that wouldn't keep him from piecing things together. What Shen Wei feared the most was not knowing just how much he had already guessed. Eventually, Zhao Yunlan said, That ghost face was a mask, and you were clearly reluctant for it to come off. Was that because I know his face? Shen Wei paled at the confirmation that Zhao Yunlan had noticed, so it had been deliberate when he'd aimed his whip at the mask. Seeing his reaction, Zhao Yunlan immediately stopped himself. Okay, you don't need to tell me. I know now. I won't ask any more, he sighed. Just stop frowning. His tone naturally lightened on the last few words, as if that were his usual way of showing that he cared, a vague way that was hard to pinpoint. Shen Wei's throat went dry. His heart hurt, as if it had been scratched. Zhao Yunlun downed the entire cup of tea in one gulp. Feeling a bit bad about having overstepped a boundary and trying to get information, he got to his feet. We just spent so much time on the road, and so much happened. You should get some rest, my lord. I'll let you be. As he headed for the door, Shen Wei called after him. The other day, when I acted out of sorts after drinking, other than my soul leaving, did I do anything else disgraceful? Zhao Yunlan paused. Shen Wei stared at the table, too afraid to look at him. Smiling, Zhao Yunlan turned back. Where his smiles were so often cold or cocky, this one was unusual. It was intentionally gentle and reassuring. Pointing to himself, he said half-jokingly, "Oh, you absolutely did. You threw yourself at me very enthusiastically. It still overwhelms me just thinking about the favor my lord showed me." You had me in the first half. I won't lie. I'm like, yeah, he's not going to tell him. He's not going to let... Oh, we're telling him. Okay, we're just... okay, and we're telling him in the most Zhao Yunlan way possible. Sure, cool. Tight. He made his farewells and went downstairs, but before getting in the car, he couldn't help looking up. Shen Wei's light was still on. The apartment wasn't many floors up, and Zhao Yunlan's keen vision let him see a silhouette at the window, watching him go silently. It gave him the sense that Shen Wei was always silently watching him depart. Behind his smiles, Zhao Yunlan's heart was heavy. Legend had it that the soul-executing emissary had been born from an incalculable span of tremendous cruelty. A great evil, a soulless being from the end of the Huangquan, his blade like snow. But what Zhao Yunlan remembered was how he always arrived in the dark, then returned to the darkness, forever solitary, even as he walked along the bitterly cold Hangguan road with souls beyond counting. He was always alone, and Zhao Yunlan felt sympathy for him. Whatever kind of connection he'd had with the soul-executing emissary in previous lives, Shen Wei clearly didn't want him to know, so Zhao Yunlan didn't try to dig the information out of him. The smothered emotion he'd seen in Shen Wei's eyes back in the hotel room sparked fear in him. There was something there that he almost didn't dare touch. He leaned against the car and smoked an entire cigarette before getting in and slowly driving out of the neighborhood. By the time Zhao Yunlan got home, Dacheng had already been sitting in front of the fridge for quite a while. The first thing the cat did was deploy the royal we as he angrily demanded, "Where's our cat food? It hasn't been long at all since we've paid attention to you. You dare throw our cat food away? How dare you? How dare you? Jail for Zhao Yunlan." Jail for 1,000 years. Shen Wei had thrown the cat food out because it had expired. Zhao Yunlan ignored him and changed his shoes. Then he poured a little dish of milk and cut a few pieces of sausage and put it all in the microwave to warm up for Dacheng. Shen Wei had also been the one who'd stocked his fridge. Dacheng was flabbergasted. He circled Zhao Yunlan's ankles, then approached to take a sniff. "What's up with you? Why do you look like you've eaten rat poison?" Zhao Yunlan flopped back on his sofa, stretching his legs. He scooped Dacheng up onto his lap and stared into the cat's eyes. "The year I was 10, you found me and gave me the soul guarding order." Dacheng nodded, confused. "You're already old enough that you want to write a memoir?" "I was just a happy, stupid child. I thought I was like a male Sailor Moon." Zhao Yunlan laughed self-deprecatingly and petted the fat cat's head. "Dacheng, tell me the truth now. Who exactly am I?" Dacheng froze. "You said you were the Yao cat who served the soul guarding order, that you were the one who found the guardian of each generation. I always thought the soul guarding order was like an ancient sword with a spirit, and anyone could be the guardian as long as they met its requirements. But the truth is, there's only ever been one guardian, right?" Dacheng stared at him, round-eyed. Sometimes he was bad at faking it. At that moment, his gaze barely resembled a cat's. "Don't go getting a swollen head." "Then where did the true flame
the true flame of Samadhi on my left shoulder go. Deching's fur stood on end. You remember? Zhao Yunlan took a cigarette from his pocket and leaned back into the sofa, feeling weary. That was a trick, dumbass. The black cat said nothing. So that means I really did have a past life. Deching meowed softly and leaned closer, hesitantly. As if he were an actual furball kitty, he nudged his head against Zhao Yunlan's belly, then nuzzled it. It was unusual for this dumb fatty to be so agreeable. Zhao Yunlan picked him up and stroked his back. I don't know, Deching said. Back then my cultivation wasn't complete. Your attitude then was very similar to now, an insolent asshole. Then one day you were just gone. For a long time, maybe dozens of years, no one knew where you went. When you finally came back, the true flame on your left shoulder was gone. You held me and roasted a fish for me. After I ate it, you took out your whip, turned it into 3 paper talismans, and gave them to me. Deching curled up in Zhao Yunlan's warm embrace and shut his deep green eyes. What did I say? Zhao Yunlan coaxed gently. You said you'd messed up big time, that you probably wouldn't be able to come back again. I carried the soul-guarding order with me and worked hard on my cultivation. I looked for you for 5 whole centuries. For a moment, Zhao Yunlan thought the heartless black cat was about to cry. His heart melted. He sighed and was just about to say something when Deching struggled out of his arms, gave his shiny black fur a great shake, and stood on his thigh to issue a decree. So you have to treat me better. The microwave has already beeped 5 or 6 times. Bring me my milk and little sausages. That's it. For Volume 1. They snuck more of a download in there at the end of the volume than I thought they were. I thought it was going to be like, boom, Shen Wei is the emissary, and then that's it. But no, they really dropped some more on your head on the way out. Okay. That was the end of Volume 1. And really, as they say, Act 1. We're going to take a short break and then come back and see what we can make of the beginning of Volume 2. Yeah? At least get a sense of where that starts? Maybe? A little bit? Okay. I'm gonna walk that off. Come back and maybe if we take like a short break, which I'm really gonna hop up and get some tea and come sit back down. If we take a short break, there might be a little bit of processing Volume 1 before going into Volume 2. But I do kind of want to take a peek at Volume 2. So I'll be right back. Oh shit, I need to get stuff ready for you. I'll be right back. Go walk around, grab a snack, roll your shoulders. I'm gonna go grab some tea. And when we come back, we'll wrap up Volume 1 and dive right into Volume 2. Alrighty. I'll see you in a minute.
And we're back. So, Volume 1 of Guardian. They're really sending you into Volume 2 knowing things and, like, suspecting some things. So we're told about Shen Wei being the emissary, which I have a reaction to the live-action drama that happened in, like, 2018, 2019. And so, should you ever watch that, there is very distinctly, the way they do it in the show is they have the emissary in the mask and everything, right? But, like, you can tell that they put the same actor playing Shen Wei, playing the emissary, because that's what's happening. So, the moment you see the emissary, you know what's up. Unless you're me, and you're thinking they're legitimately two different people for, like, at least a couple of episodes before you finally recognize that Shen Wei is the emissary. And I'm someone who's really good with faces. Yeah, that's committed to film forever. But other than, what are we thinking? New people, what are we thinking? If you have not experienced Guardian before, what are we thinking about Shen Wei being the emissary? When did you clue in? I felt that pretty much with the way that they introduced Shen Wei, they, like, heavily hinted at certain things, at least to the longevity of how long Shen Wei had been around. So kind of, to me, it leapt out as super obvious that something was up, but maybe not exactly putting together the puzzle pieces that he was the emissary. Wolf, yes, one of the proudest, I don't want to say quote because, one of my favorite things I've ever said was during the Guardian reaction, I compared Shen Wei to basically the idea of if Clark Kent was Batman. And that is one of the most accurate things I have ever said, and I still stand by it. That is very deeply what that is, and I can't unsee it. You can't make me see otherwise. And what a great idea for a character. Intentional or no. If Clark Kent was Batman, genius character concept. It only took me 2 episodes to recognize Shen Wei as the emissary, but I was staring him straight in the face for 2 episodes, fully acting like they were 2 separate people. It was a whole moment. Milkshake knew it from the start. You'd been spoiled by Tumblr. Well, you know, that happens. The descriptions of them matched. I don't think I necessarily even clocked that. Clicked about midway. Yeah, mentioning how cold Shen Wei was. Yes. Oh, true. Also, some genre awareness from how danmeis go. Yeah, that's another thing. And even, not necessarily danmei, I mean, yes, danmei specifically, given the tropes that are at play, but also, like, if you're familiar with romance stories in general, like, the odds, unless they were going for some love triangle thing, which would probably be mentioned on the back of the book, it would be somewhat strange to introduce a character like the emissary being such a strong candidate as a love interest as well, unless the two were the same person. It was so hard to hold back comments, and it still is, because we're only a third of the way through. There's still plenty of stuff that Priest has sprinkled in rather beautifully, I must say. She really has laid the groundwork in Act 1 to take us into the rest of the story. And then now on top of on top of learning what we learned about Shen Wei, now we definitely know that there's something going on with Zhao Yunlan that he is not aware of and does not remember. He is much older. They basically spell out, Da Qing spells out that actually there's only one guardian and you're it. And me coming to find you was just me coming to find the guardian, which is something that I have to do. It wasn't that there's a different one and Da Qing has to find who it is with every generation. It's just, no, he has to find your reincarnation every time. So Zhao Yanlan is like the guardian. And meanwhile, Shen Wei is the emissary. Amazing idea for a danmei love story. Such a strong concept. It's so good. Oh my god, does Zhao match my... Oh, I guess he does. If Zhao matches the hat, one, entirely unintentional. Two, I think Zhao might be... Maybe it reads differently on camera, actually. I don't know why I'm holding the book open. It's not like we didn't finish the volume. Oh, you know, it kind of does. Even though he's a lighter green, it still matches. I'll take that. There are much worse people to match with than Zhao Yunlan. Power couple, yes. It's the power couple. Oh, priest writes cats. Rather flawlessly, yes. There are definitely things about Da Qing that reminds me of, like, if my own cat was fulfilling the role of Da Qing, he would do it quite well, actually. Oh, no, that's still way too hot. I don't know why I'm trying to take a drink out of that. Silent reading is officially being translated into English. It comes out in about a year. Volume 1 comes out in about a year. I already have it down on my calendar. Could not be more excited. May have screamed when it got announced. Like a month ago or something like that. I'm ADHD. What is time? They actually announced, like, 7 Seas just announced another slate of like a dozen danmeis that they have that they're going to translate, and I think most, if not all of them, aren't slated to come out until this time next year. So we will be inundated. But they announced a lot of stuff, and I remember, I haven't looked at them all yet, but a couple of them sound really good. So I've definitely clocked a couple. So, since we're starting volume 2 here, I guess I hadn't looked at the cover for volume 2 of Guardian. But, covers of all time, really. This made me look at the third one, and the third one, they literally went for the progression of just getting closer until they're just kissing on the cover of the third one. As it should be, frankly. All three of Priest is pretty Priest is pretty prolific overall when talking about things from Priest that have been licensed. Priest is pretty prolific overall. Specifically, when it comes to danmeis, though, I forget what the list of danmeis are, because I don't think everything she writes is danmei. Unless I'm getting that wrong. It's been a second since I've looked up everything she's done, actually. Whew. Oh, yeah, no, the hood on Shen Wei in Volume 2. Please. Please. Whew. Okay. It is 4:30. So I think, really quickly, let me looking at page math here. I think, oh yeah. These first couple of chapters are pretty short. I think we could get through a couple of chapters of Volume 2 before we have to call it for this Thursday. So let me check and make sure that there isn't any more absolutely offensive art that's in the beginning. Oh, here's an actual full thing of the cover that's stunning. Without the text and everything on it. That's very conscientious of them. I think this is pretty routine. I think they usually do this, but I always forget that they do this, and I really shouldn't. Oh, there is! There is another bit of art right here. Hang on, let me make sure that this one's not as simple as just a full page. It's only half a page, but you need to be made aware. Because this, let me get the glare in the right place here. Also stunning. Beautiful. Gorgeous. Couldn't be prettier. Good lord. Oh. Okay. Should we begin volume 2? Which, according to the back, the next case is a bit of a mess. Affects, like, a lot of people, if this sounds familiar. A lot of people in pain and fleeing to a hospital. Which I love how she's working in main plot stuff, but we still get like side cases. That's flowing rather well, actually. She's able to... It's a very well realized like world and concept they have going on. And she's just dipping into and out of like other cases and other things. And bringing it all back around in the end to have it be relevant to what's going on with the immediate people that we care about. But without it feeling tedious or boring or dear God, get to the good part kind of thing. I'm very curious to see how it wraps up in volumes 2 and 3, considering this is quite a bit shorter than the series that we've read in the past on these streams. The shortest one I'd read up until then was Motozushi, and that was 5 volumes. So, a bit interested to see how a danmei pulls off. A danmei with a story of this size and dealing with all the past lives handles all of that in just 3 volumes instead of, like, a dozen. Alrighty. Page 1 of volume 2. Night had already fallen when Go Cheng Chung left the group home for autistic children. Fresh snow covered Dragon City, and the roads were treacherous. He had to drive at a snail's pace, hoping to reach the post office before it closed for the day. His dumpy little car was packed with all kinds of books, textbooks, exercise books, and children's literature, to name a few. They were all wrapped in craft paper and plastic, and he planned to mail them to the elementary school he sponsored before the end of the year. We could open all 3 volumes with Best Boy, and I'd be okay with that. I feel like most people would be okay with that. Between Go Cheng Chung's timidity and his mediocre driving skills, he navigated the wet, slippery road as if his car were a large turtle. But it might simply have been an inauspicious day for traveling, because he nearly hit someone despite his cautious driving. A person in gray dashed out in front of him and fell, landing practically under the wheels of his car. Several cars skidded to a stop. Only the fact that everyone was driving very slowly due to the snow and slick roads prevented utter pandemonium. Cursing, a man with an explosive temper rolled down his window to yell, "What's your problem? If you're trying to scam someone, can't you at least do it someplace with less traffic?" Go Cheng Chung was already scrambling out of his car. Are you okay? I'm so sorry, I really am." The person who'd fallen was incredibly skinny, barely more than skin and bones. His withered face was half hidden by the brim of his hat, and what skin Go Cheng Chung could see was a waxy yellow. A black aura seemed to cling to the man, but perhaps that was just his imagination. The incensed bystander was still raging. "Why are you bothering with him? Why didn't you just run him over?" Go Cheng Chung, conflicted, waved apologetically at Mr. Road Rage before trying to reach out and help the fallen man up. "Can you stand? Can I take you to the hospital?"
The man on the ground responded to Go Cheng Chung's kindness by slapping his hand away. Then he pulled himself up and walked away. But as he did, their gazes just so happened to meet. Startled, Go Cheng Chung found himself staring into horrifyingly empty eyes, devoid of any spark of life. As the man brushed past, Go Cheng Chung then glimpsed something below his ear, a pitch-black mark shaped like a fingerprint. "Are you sure you're all right?" Go Cheng Chung yelled after him. "Do you want my contact information? If anything comes up, you can call me. My name is—" But the man in the hat had already turned and disappeared down a little side street. The driver who'd been yelling left as well, but not without leaving a parting shot in the middle of the street in the frigid wind for Go Cheng Chung. He spat, "What kind of dumbass are you, bro?" Go dumbass, sighed, turned, and opened his car door. But as he was about to get in, he suddenly saw a reflection in the car window. The guy in the hat had reappeared, his profile just visible around the corner. Somehow, he looked as if he were up to no good. Just then, two women walked past the lurking man. As they crossed his path, his mouth suddenly gaped open and his tongue, nearly 15 centimeters long, protruded. Watching them go, he inhaled deeply. One of the women abruptly staggered as if her blood sugar had just crashed. She seemed to be on the verge of passing out, but her companion was able to steady her, and then something floated out of her body and straight into the man's mouth. Go Cheng Chung whirled around, but there was nothing to be seen other than the snowy streets bustling with pedestrians. He stumbled into his car, heart pounding thunderously. Quickly taking the little baton Zhao Yunlan had given him out of his bag, he tucked it into his jacket's inner chest pocket. He gave it a firm pat, as if it were a source of courage, and inched his car back onto the road. When Go Cheng Chung arrived at work the next day, he was greeted by Zhu Hong's meal card flying towards his face. "Xiaogao Jie wants beef pancakes today, the kind that have been fried to a crisp. And bring me a cup of yogurt while you're at it." Go Cheng Chung was accustomed to being bossed around, so he simply set down his bag, made a noise of agreement, and left for the cafeteria. He reached the doorway just as Chu Shujia arrived with half a jianbing in his mouth. Go Cheng Chung snapped to attention. "Good morning, Chuga." Chuga barely raised an eyelid to give him a once-over as if not wanting to be bothered with him, and kept walking. But after only a couple steps, Chu Shujia abruptly reversed course. He grabbed Go Cheng Chung by the collar and dragged him back before the kid could leave the office. "Hold it. What filthy thing did you run into?" Go Cheng Chung gave him a blank stare. Chu Shujia's jianbing-scented hand seemed to grab something from Go Cheng Chung's shoulders, then spun him around. After briskly swatting at Go Cheng Chung's back and both sides of his waist, Chu Shujia took out a napkin and wiped his hands before giving Go Cheng Chung a shove. "You had bad luck all over you. I cleaned you up, so you can go now." Red-faced from all the swatting, Go Cheng Chung darted off, running with tiny steps. Munching on the thin crisps inside the jianbing, Chu Shujia asked, "What is this kid cultivating for? He's so rich with merits that he's practically dripping fat." Zhu Hong, who still hadn't had breakfast, found her mouth watering as if he were describing a succulent pig nearly ready for slaughter. "Hey, is there food?" Zhao Yunlan came dashing through the criminal investigation unit's door. Catching sight of Chu Shujia, Zhao Yunlan gave him a quick pat-down without another word. When his search turned up a hard-boiled egg in Chu Shujia's coat pocket, he unceremoniously claimed it for himself. Chu Shujia was outraged, but as Zhao Yunlan's subordinate, he didn't have the guts to protest. Next, Zhao Yunlan grabbed a carton of milk from the fridge, ripped it open, and guzzled it down. "That's mine," Da Qing howled. "You're even stealing cat food? Have you no shame?" Zhu Hong asked, "Why don't you go to the cafeteria?" "I'm in a hurry." Mouthful of milk and egg, Zhao Yunlan strode off purposefully, straight into a wall. At that very moment, Go Cheng Chung happened to return with the beef pancakes. Before he had a chance to register the shock, he saw his boss vanish through the wall. "Okay, close your mouth." Zhu Hong took her breakfast from him. "There's an invisible door there. It leads to the library. You're a mortal who doesn't have enough cultivation to understand anything in there, even if you could enter. So naturally, you can't see the door." Despite having just finished his jianbing, Chu Shujia didn't feel quite full without an egg to follow it. He quickly snagged a piece of the beef pancake out of Zhu Hong's hands. "I can see it, but I can't go in. I'm barred from the library." "How come?" Go Cheng Chung asked. Chu Shujia answered with a somewhat ominous smile. "Because I have a record." Go Cheng Chung bit his tongue. Unsurprisingly, he was still afraid of Chuga. 5 minutes later, Zhao Yunlan burst back out from the wall, now holding an old, tattered book. He tossed the eggshell and milk carton into Go Chang Chung's garbage can, then grabbed a tissue from Ju Hong's desk. Without a word to anyone, he left so quickly that wind seemed to rise in his wake. That was the last they saw of him for the day. It had already been half a month since they'd returned from the snowy mountain. In the blink of an eye, New Year's had come and gone. The temperatures in Dragon City had plummeted with the arrival of a huge windstorm that blew everyone, living and dead alike, into the Lunar New Year. Into the Lunar Woo! Hello. Into the Lunar New Year. The approach of the Lunar New Year found Director Zhao so busy that he could barely remember his own name. Between humans, ghosts, Yao, and monsters, he had endless social obligations. All day, every day, his work phone rang like a hotline. The desk calendars in each department had already been changed to new ones. In the depths of winter, darkness came early, so the night shift staff were out and about even before the end of the workday. On this particular day, Sangzan floated into the criminal investigation unit. Comrade Sangzan didn't have it easy. In life, he had been a ruthless conspirator. After his death, he'd been stuck in the mountain river all. Days, then years, then centuries had all run together while the outside world carried on without him. And now that he was free and reformed, ready to be a new person, a new ghost, rather, he faced a harsh realization. Once a cunning conspirator, he was now too ignorant to understand anything anyone said. The only person left in the world who could communicate with him was Wang Zheng. And while the Hangul language was her mother tongue, the plain fact that she'd stopped speaking it by the time she was 20. The plain fact was that she'd stopped speaking it by the time she was 20. In the 300 years since then, she'd been fully immersed in Mandarin. So when Sangzan realized it was easier for Wang Jun to communicate with the outside people and ghosts than with him, he decided to knuckle down and learn Mandarin as well. A ghost learns Mandarin. Sangzan was a ruthless person, as evidenced by the fact that he'd once poisoned his own wife and offspring. He would stop at absolutely nothing to achieve a goal. So for half a month now, he'd been muttering random syllables in Wang Zheng's ear practically nonstop, driving her halfway to a nervous breakdown. But by this point, he was slowly starting to grasp Mandarin pronunciation and could now mimic others somewhat. He could even hold simple conversations. Working hard to shape each syllable, one slow word at a time, Sangzan relayed the Mandarin message he'd been entrusted with the best he could. Galan says, besides the Yili Bomus, there is a Benedict fee. She wants everyone to prepare their wheat. He hadn't memorized the message very well. He understood only half of what he was saying and was parroting the sounds. Amitabha, why are we preparing wheat? Lin Jing asked. Are we making buns for the Lunar New Year's Eve dinner? Gesturing, Sangzan said, not buns. Wheat. It's batter if it's transformation fee. Director Zhao said that on top of our year-end bonuses, everyone will receive an extra 5,000 yuan as a benefit. Come to my office and get it before the weekend. Next week, give me all your receipts, especially the ones for transportation costs. Labor insurance receipts are acceptable too. Wang Zheng hastily floated down from upstairs, shooting a glare at Sangzan. Can't even learn to speak properly. Sangzan's usually stern and fierce expression turned tender at the sight of her. With a love-struck smile, he went over and tugged carefully on her hand. Don't mess around, I'm busy, Wang Zheng scolded quietly before addressing the room. Who did Director Zhao get to meet up with? I have an urgent document that needs his signature. Sangzan said, I'll take it. Wang Zheng raised a hand to block him and ducked out of his way. You'll scare his drinking buddies. Sangzan didn't get angry about being rejected. He just tagged along behind her like a large dog, watching as she hurried through the darkened hallways, flustered and busy. Occasionally, she'd stop and say something to him in a language no one else understood, bringing a peaceful, satisfied smile to his face. I fucking hate people who flaunt their love in front of everyone, especially in a foreign language, Ju Hong complained. The public nuisance finally stopped flirting with everything that moves, but now these two are trying to blind me with their sappy displays. May Buddha have mercy, Lin Jing intoned. Unwed benefactor, be free of envy, jealousy, and hatred. Ju Hong was about to give him a smack when the phone on her desk rang. She took the call instead. Hello? Oh? Where? She gestured sharply, preventing anyone from leaving. Everybody watched as she tore a sticky note free and began to scribble on it. Go on. 26. Yellowcliff Road, Yellowcliff Temple Hospital, right? Okay, I'll let them know. Oh, and when you have time tonight, come by the office. Wang Zhang has a bunch of stuff for you to sign. It was clearly Zhao Yunlan on the line. Zhu Hong hung up and said, in keeping with our department's tradition of doing nothing all day and then racking up overtime at night, it's 5 minutes past time to clock out and our fucking boss has just dumped a pile of work in our lap. Hearing that, Lin Jing bolted out the door before anyone else could react. As he vanished into the night, he cried, not listening, not listening, I'm not listening. Zhu Hong stuck the note with the address to the wall, wrapped her scarf over her face, and followed right behind him. I'm a cold-blooded animal. I'm afraid of the cold. Goodbye. Da Qing slipped out as the door shut. My winter coat hasn't even come in yet. And just like that, the only ones left in the office were Chu Shujie, who hadn't had time to react, and the fool Go Changcheng. Fuck, said Chu Shujie. 10 minutes later, Chu Shujie was a passenger in Go Changcheng's car, and the pair were on their way to Yellowcliff Temple Hospital. That's the end of the chapter. Man, I legitimately don't remember what I heard about these two in the book. They were a delightful secondary ship for me in the show, but I can't remember if I heard people say that, oh yeah, that's not in the book though. It's like not in the book at all. Or if I just made that up and there's at least vibes in the book. I can't remember. I'm deliberately not looking at chat so that I can find out as we read. But I legit, I don't know. I remember people telling me, saying one way or the other, but I can't remember which one they said. So with that in mind, also, you want to talk about casting. I mean, casting the entire show was somebody sold their soul to somebody. But Go Changcheng and Chuga in particular were they were simply beautiful. I don't, if you haven't seen the show, you must after we finish the book. You must. You simply must. It is such a good time. Chapter 2. We are on page 21. Out of all the people Go Changcheng feared the most, Chu Shujie topped the list. I'm okay. I'm alright. A banger opening to any ship. Okay. Even Zhao Yunlan had to move aside. While Zhao Yunlan was powerful, he also tended to be kind. He cracked jokes and messed around like any normal person might. At most, he was intimidating in the way a father or brother might be. Chu Shujie was different. To Go Changcheng, he always seemed to have a cold, mysterious aura, like some sort of unapproachable sage. Go Changcheng, carrying his ever-present little notebook, followed Chu Shujie into the hospital. He didn't dare utter even a single unnecessary word. It's stoic and sunshine, you know? Like, this should be... I don't have to explain. You get it, you know. A young police officer was waiting by the door. After checking his ID and showing him theirs, they headed for the patient's room. As they walked, the officer, Xiao Wang, said, our boss is in there too. He just got off the phone with Director Zhao. The situation is pretty grim. Somebody out there is selling poisoned food. The hospital still hasn't been able to figure out what the victim in here was actually poisoned with. Poisoned food? Chu Shujie asked. What did he eat? Some fruit, Xiao Wang said. According to the family, the victim bought an orange at the roadside and ate it. The second he finished it, he collapsed. They immediately rushed him to the hospital and called the police. As he spoke, Xiao Wang opened the door to the patient's room. They were greeted by an agonized, chilling scream. Startled, Go Changcheng stood on tiptoe to peek from behind Chu Shujie. They're already coming at me with the visuals. On the bed lay a man who might have been 30 or 40 years old, writhing and struggling against the group of doctors and nurses trying to hold him down. A sobbing woman, perhaps a family member, stood beside him. The man had a death grip on one doctor's hand as he howled and gave shrill cries. My leg's broken! Oh, my leg! His leg, Chu Shuja turned to Xiaowang. Didn't you say it was poisoned food? Thing is, his leg's fine, Xiaowang said. Not even a bruise. Nothing shows up on the x-rays either. None of it makes any sense. Chu Shuja approached the bedside and patted a nurse on the shoulder, asking her to make room for him. He pulled back the man's eyelids and examined his pupils. After also checking behind the man's ears, he chanted under his breath. Then he reached out with a grabbing motion and pressed down hard against the man's chest with a clenched fist. The struggling patient was suddenly calm. Does it still hurt? Chu Shuja asked. The man, finally able to catch his breath, gave him a grateful look and shook his head. The doctors and nurses, on the other hand, were all giving Chu Shuja strange, judgmental looks. It was very possible that they all suddenly suspected there was a cult involved somehow. When Chu Shuja let go, the man instantly resumed his desperate screaming, rolling around on the bed. Chu Shuja ignored him, turned to Go Cheng Chung and snapped his fingers. We're done here. Let's go. We've got to get back and write a report. Go Cheng Chung gaped. Done? How could this count as being done? What had even happened, exactly? Scene break. After Shen Wei concluded his last class, he waited until the students had left before packing up his own things and returning to his home in the mortal realm. On the way, he couldn't help repeatedly looking at his phone, even though the device had only 3 functions: calling, texting, and displaying the time. Shen Wei wasn't a fan of technology. He was a slow-tempered, antiquated man who still found writing letters more convenient. If something was urgent, he could write a quick note. If not, he could take his time writing, and so what if it ran a little long? And as for phone calls, well, you paid for those by the minute, which gave him the horribly uncomfortable sense that someone was scrutinizing him as he spoke. All of that aside, there was a sense of happiness and anticipation in the act of opening a letter, especially if the person who'd written it was special to him. Every single word was full of life, and letters could be kept forever. Alas, Zhao Yunlan never wrote. He couldn't even be bothered with all the strokes it took to write his own name when signing for packages, so he'd draw a circle and leave it at that. Shen Wei's phone still held every text Zhao Yunlan had ever sent him. He couldn't bear to delete a single one. In the time since they'd returned from the snowy mountain, Zhao Yunlan hadn't pestered him even once. Perhaps Zhao Yunlan still felt uncomfortable. And why wouldn't he? Who wouldn't be made uncomfortable by someone as inauspicious as the soul-executing emissary? It was just as well, Shen Wei told himself. At most, a mortal might live a few dozen years, barely the blink of an eye. When death arrived, a human life would be extinguished like a candle, and this life would be no exception. In dying, Zhao Yunlan would once again forget him and this awkward interlude. Once again, forget him. And this, once again, forgetting him once again. Okay. The door to Shen Wei's bedroom was always closed. He pushed it open, and the lights inside turned on automatically, revealing a room devoid of furnishings. Instead, there were portraits on the wall, with framing and mounting that betrayed their great age. The paintings were all of the same man: his front, his profile, his back. His clothes changed with the times, but the man himself was always the same, down to the subtlest expression of his brows. Life after life after life, never changing. Old paintings gave way to an array of photographs of all sizes. Here the man was still a child. There he had grown up. There were photos of him laughing and photos where his brows were drawn in concern, photos of him fooling around or engaged in conversation. There was even one immortalizing a moment when a cat had jumped onto his head. Each and every one was of Zhao Yunlan. It's fine if I'm the only one to know. It's fine if only I remember, Shen Wei thought. When the time came, he too would simply disappear. No one, nobody would notice. It wasn't as if he should ever have existed in the first place. Until that day came, the only liberties Shen Wei allowed himself were a few extra glances when Zhao Yunlan didn't notice. He occasionally slipped into Zhao Yunlan's home at night, but never dared stay for long. Zhao Yunlan was very alert. But in a stroke of good fortune, Zhao Yunlan recently had many dinners to attend, and he would arrive home half drunk. Only at such times could Shen Wei risk drawing a little closer. Shen Wei had done everything imaginable to protect this one person, the one person he could never touch, and yet those people dared. Cold fury flashed across Shen Wei's face. He vanished in a cloud of black mist. The soul-executing emissary sped past the Huangquan Road, alerting the netherworld. Trembling, the head magistrate brought the Heibai Wuchang, which first footnote of the volume. Heibai, I believe, Heibai Wuchang are two deities. Wow. Are two deities, one dressed in black and one in white, who lead the souls of the dead to the netherworld. The soul-executing emissary my bad. Trembling, the head magistrate brought the Heibai, you'd think I'd remember, Wuchang, and a crowd of reapers to welcome him at the foot of Naihe Bridge. When Shen Wei arrived, the magistrate offered him the utmost respect. I didn't know my lord would be gracing us with his presence. The emissary didn't react. He only said, "The mountain river all has appeared and is now in my hands. The merit brush shouldn't be far off." The magistrate's close observation suggested that the emissary was in a foul mood. Smiling, he said carefully, "Yes, my lord's methods are certainly—" The emissary cut him off with an icy glance. "I've come to tell you something. Whether or not you believe me, I am the protector of the Great Seal. I won't miss a single one of the 4 hallowed artifacts. I will carry out my duty, and if I ever wished to break my vow, nothing could stop me, not even if you reawakened Kunlun Jun or restored the primordial gods to life. Stop your dirty tricks. You do not want to anger me." The magistrate bowed his head very low. "I fear my lord may have misunderstood. Connecting the Book of Merits to the Book of Life and Death was the Guardian's idea. That's why we rushed to make it and give it to him. We never imagined it could betray my lord's identity. We greatly regret not considering things more fully." There was a trace of a sneer in the emissary's voice. "For your sake, I hope that's true. Mind your actions. I'll take my leave." On his final words, the emissary was already disappearing into a cloud of black mist. Eventually, the air of cold and wrath that accompanied him dissipated, and the reapers could finally let out a breath of relief. The magistrate wiped sweat from his brow with a sleeve. "My lord," whispered a reaper, stepping forward, "the emissary has a point. The 4 hallowed artifacts are divided between him and the Chaos King of the Gui, and he is the protector of the Great Seal. Even if Kunlun Jun did awaken, he's just a mortal now. What could he do? I say we might as well relax and have faith in our emissary." "If the Great Seal were to break, do you know what kind of price would be required of its protector?" the magistrate asked quietly. "All the primordial gods had to sacrifice themselves, never mind him, a demigod. It took hundreds of tribulations and lifetimes for him to cultivate a physical form for himself from the vicious darkness. Do you really think he could throw away tens of thousands of years of effort and sacrifice himself for the Great Seal?" The reaper shivered, worried and anxious once more. Voice still low, the magistrate continued, "It's best for the doer to undo his own handiwork. It was Kunlun Jun who appointed the soul-executing emissary as the Great Seal's protector. At this point, our only choice is to reawaken him. But Kunlun Jun's immortal spirit has been reincarnated over thousands of years. He's just a mortal now. Almost none of his divinity remains." "Yes, almost none." The magistrate looked up. "Have you heard of the Heavenly Eye?" What a kind of oddly perfect place to stop for today. We are on page 29 for chapter 3. Ooh. The intrigue. The cover, please. Whew. A lot of intrigue going from one volume to the next, which there usually is, but there's even more so given the fact that it's so short compared to other series that we've had. Ooh, they're really dangling questions, and it's not like they introduce a mysterious element and we're like, okay, maybe we'll find out about this in 7 books. It's like, no, we have 2 books left, and this is the beginning of the second one. So shit's going to go down,
And I kind of love that. This is a lovely change of pace, because as much as I love a good long series, I really love getting into Critical Role. Really revealed my appreciation for long form stories. Critical Role, even in these circles, long danmei series, is incredibly stupidly fucking long. But unbelievably worth it. Still, the first campaign in Critical Role is one of the most memorable and important stories to me, for many reasons that we won't get into. So similarly, like, that's why I had no problem jumping in with, like, Heaven Official's Blessing. What, like 8 volumes or somehow? Absolutely yes. Urha, like 11, maybe even like 12 volumes. Absolutely yes. I love a long form story, but it's great to change up the pace every now and then and get something that's like 3 books, and not even 3 particularly massive books. 3 books, beginning to end, nice, beautiful, fleshed out story, but still short enough that you get those 1-2 punches faster. I'm very much enjoying breaking up the longer series with some short ones in between. We're probably going to stay with that. That's just really nice to have. Whew, well then, I'm glancing at chat here for a second. This is very tightly plotted. Yes, epic. She definitely, I don't know how long a priest project typically is. Actually, now that I think about it, I really have no idea. I don't know if she just spits out trilogies or usually just standalones. I have no idea. But from what I can see is that her stuff really moves, which makes it curious because the show is like 40 episodes and therefore has to cover a lot more because these things are so tightly, it's a trilogy and it's a tightly paced trilogy. So it's interesting to have 40 episodes of things where they could, on one hand, there's so many more cases and they're able to like flesh out like all this stuff. But at the same time, there's good filler, but there's filler. Whereas Priest apparently runs a tight ship. She moves it along. She gets things going. It's going to be so interesting to rewatch Guardian after this. And it'll be a friggin' about time, too. Because I haven't rewatched Guardian since I've watched it. I, 1, haven't had the time. And 2, I have discovered that trying to rewatch shows or movies that are in a foreign language is incredibly difficult because it requires all of my focus. Because obviously I don't understand the language. So it's not like I can just have a casual rewatch up and be paying attention while I'm getting other things done. It has to be dedicated time, and that apparently is very difficult for me to do. So, being able to rewatch Guardian probably like over my winter break in December will be delightful, and a little way too long in coming. Blue, that was gonna be another one of my questions, if Guardian was also published online chapter by chapter, which I tell you, that format of publishing is looking very interesting to me for a few reasons. But then it's also wild to me because if it's just published chapter by chapter and then it's broken up into volumes for novels, the way that it's plotted, as I drop the bookmark, the way that it's plotted then must be just that much better because it effortlessly broke from one volume into the next, from one phase of the story into the next. And you know me, I love good structure. Alrighty, so it is 5:05. I can't get the bookmark down there, but I will in a second when I'm like off camera. that is it for today's reading stream. Thank you so much for having a little bit more of a chaotic time with me in the second half of this stream as we jumped from volume to chatting to another volume to a little bit more chatting. A little crazier, but once again, it breaks up the vibes. It's nice to have a stream that goes a little different every now and then. And this was a lot of fun. We were on page, let me say it again. We were heading into chapter 3 on page 29 for chapter 3. And that's what we will get into next Tuesday. I hope you're having a lovely week. I hope you have a beautiful weekend. And I will see you on next Tuesday to keep reading the intrigue that is Guardian. And I'm still not over this cover. This is going to take me a second. But I'll see you in a few days for more. Please remember to take care of yourselves. Please remember to enjoy Halloween. We will be having a stream on Halloween. I stream Tuesdays and Thursdays to read gay stuff. And next Thursday is Halloween, and we will be streaming for it. If I have the opportunity to do something on a holiday, I really, really try to. It's always a good time. And sometimes people don't go to parties on holidays. Sometimes they just stay at home and chill, and they deserve to read gay things on Halloween, So I will see you next week for the regular scheduled time, regular programming, Tuesdays, Thursdays at 3 p.m. It's just that Thursday will be Halloween. And I hope you have a lovely everything, a lovely weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday.